Hello all the crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and let's talk about backing up your projects. So in the last video, I talked about backing up your projects the quick and dirty way using GameMaker's built-in project import-export system, and today we are going to look at something a little bit more robust than that. So I'm going to open up another one of these random projects that I've been working on in the early parts of this Introduction to GameMaker series. I think this is the same one I was looking at the last time, the random numbers one. And let's say that you are working on your game and you want to have some kind of mechanism for backing up your work, so that if like something happens to your computer, or let's say you accidentally like delete something or make a change that you didn't intend, you want an easy way to go back to what you were doing without having to like redo a bunch of work. So there's a couple of levels of that. So I talked about in the last video, again, GameMaker's built-in project import-export system. And that is fine if you're in a hurry, or if you just want an easy way to like Google Drive your project to someone else. But that is most certainly not a practical, viable, long-term solution for backups. Something else you might try, and a lot of people have tried this over the years, and it breaks for complicated reasons. If you have on your computer some kind of shared folder, people have tried to store their GameMaker projects, and I don't have one set up on here, but in like a Microsoft OneDrive folder, or in a Dropbox folder, or in a shared Google Drive folder, or something like that. And that doesn't work. That will break your project, because basically, if the system tries to sync the files in the shared folder at the same time the GameMaker tries to access them, things can break in ways that you probably would rather avoid. Instead, in this video, we are going to talk about something known as source control. So to get started with source control, look at the top of the GameMaker IDE. You'll actually notice that there's a tab in the menu bar that says source control, and there's a couple of options underneath it if you were to like open it up. And what we are going to do is we are going to completely ignore this, because the GameMaker does have some source control-ish features built into it. It's not very good. I wish it wasn't there. I think it causes more confusion for people than it actually helps people. This video is going to be all about using an external tool for setting up source control. Now, what you really should do if you want a proper, robust way of backing up your game, and this is something that you should really do for pretty much all games that you make. Like, if you plan on working on it for more than about 15 minutes, you should be doing this. So I'm gonna go and actually connect this computer to the internet, which is not that easy because it's a wired connection and my Ethernet cable is barely long enough to get to the router to where my desk is. And we are going to use a system known as Git. So it's important to know that there are a couple of different source control systems out there. Git is by far the most common one to use with GameMaker.
Hey.
By the way, in case you're curious, Git isn't like short for anything. Instead, Git is sort of like an antiquated British English slang for like an unpleasant person. The creator of it, Linus named it after himself. Anyway, Git exists as a command line tool, and you can use that if you'd like. I will not be discussing the command line tool in this video. I might do that in a future video if I feel like going there. What we're instead going to use is a graphical user interface client for Git, and there's also a couple of these. I'm going to be using a version known as, and apparently I can't just scroll down and find it in the Google search, Github Desktop. So GitHub is basically an online centralized location where you can store Git repositories. You don't have to use GitHub if you want to use Git. There are other online centralized source repositories that you can use with Git. Bitbucket, there's a couple of them. The fun way to explain the difference between Git and GitHub is to say that Git is to GitHub what porn is to... On second thought, I probably shouldn't continue this metaphor. Anyway, the point of this is that Git and GitHub often go hand in hand, but they don't have to. Another small detail that some of you might be interested and or concerned with. So GitHub, the website, is owned by Microsoft. Github Desktop, the software, is developed by Microsoft. Microsoft has been on a bit of a mission to make enemies with basically everybody as fast as possible in recent days. And if you like just don't want to deal with Microsoft at all, like I said, there are alternatives to GitHub. There are other websites that you can use as online source control repositories. There are also alternatives to GitHub Desktop. Feel free to go and have a look at those. They should all serve more or less the same purpose with more or less the same features. I'm just going to be using GitHub Desktop for this video because it is probably still the most common one to be used, and it's also the one that I use, and I want to be able to talk about something and, like, be familiar with it and not have any surprises. So GitHub Desktop is sort of an intermediate between Git and GitHub, and if I go to this download page here, and I will have it linked in the description of this video, we can download the installer, and GitHub Desktop is going to be, like I said earlier, basically a graphical user interface way to make Git, as in the command line tool, like, not require you to use the command line. So if I open this up, we are going to be prompted to sign into github.com. And I'm not going to do that because I don't feel like it, and also I don't remember my GitHub password, so I'm just going to say skip this step. My name is... And as far as I know, this is just basically information that's going to be attached to individual commit messages, which we'll get to in a minute. I don't have to put in my real name or email or anything like this here. I think that is definitely a real email address, which I can definitely be accessed at. And now that we've got that squared away, we can go and get started. So we have a couple of options here. Clone a repository from the internet. If you are looking at a different project on something like GitHub and you want to be able to clone it to your computer and mess around with it, this is how you would do that. You can also say add an existing repository from your drive if you've already got a Git repository set up somewhere, or most likely what you want to do is click the middle option, which is create a new repository on your local drive. And this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go and create a repository name. Let's call this, let's go with how to use source control. And we can initialize it with like a description if we'd like. We can initialize it with a README file if we'd like. That is probably not super important for this video, so I'm just going to not do that. You can set up a git ignore, which is basically a text file telling Git which files not to look at. Does GameMaker have like a default one? It doesn't look like it does. I thought it did, but it looks like GitHub Desktop doesn't know about that.
Hey.
You can also attach a license to your code, which is important if you want to share it with other people. The license tells people what they can and can't legally do with it. I'm not going to go there now. I'm just going to go hit create repository, and we are in... Wow. This is light mode GitHub Desktop. Can I, like, not have that? I'm not one of those people who's, like, weirdly militant about dark modes, but this one just looks... This light mode just looks bad. Appearance, dark... Alright, so it defaults to your system visual theme, but, yeah, wow, that looks a lot better, doesn't it? So now we have an empty source control repository, and we can start putting things in here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the GameMaker home screen, and let's go create ourselves a new project, but instead of storing it in the default location, I'm going to say, source control experiments. I'm going to save this in the folder that I created, which is going to be in, and you, I forget if I drew attention to it. That's going to be in the My Documents folder in the GitHub folder, and this How to Use Source Control folder is the repository that we created, and we can just select this folder and we can store our project there. So now I can say let's go. And we now have a GameMaker project stored in the source control repository. If you go back to GitHub Desktop, you'll see that there have been some changes, and these are files which have been newly added. Anyway, this is an empty GameMaker project. It's not too exciting, but by tradition, I do like to do what is known as make a commit whenever I start up a new GameMaker project as sort of like a starting point. And honestly, for me personally, it's kind of just like a tradition to do this. But we are going to... what is known as make a commit, which you can think of as like a save state in a game, or perhaps a system restore point, or some other kind of checkpoint that you can come back to. We are going to give this commit a description. I'm going to say initialized project. We can say commit 8 files to main, and the list of changes are going to be gone. And if we go into the history, into the project history, we can see that there is an initial commit, which was set up automatically when we created this. And we also have our initialized project commit, which is, it did create a git ignore? I thought I didn't check that box. Anyway, it's got our GameMaker project files that come with an empty GameMaker project. And if we ever wanted to, for example, roll back our changes, or if we wanted to see what changes we made at a particular point, you could look through the history, you could look through the git commit history, and you could see what those changes might be. You could right-click and you could do things like revert changes in that commit. Anyway, if you mess around, we can do something such as let's create a sprite, SPR, smiley, And we can go and create ourselves a smiley face sprite. Let's go make it a green fill. Let's make it, I don't know, a like dark blue background or something like that. And we can draw ourselves a smiley face. And maybe we want to go and make an object, and we can say obj player. Drag that smiley face object onto it. Let's go and create some really basic behaviors. If keyboard check vk left x minus equals 2. And we can have some basic keyboard controls. Let's go and drop this obj player into the room. If I run the game, we'll be able to walk around using the arrow keys. Okay. This is going to perhaps not be the most interesting game, but it is again a starting point. And the more important part of what I'm doing here is I want to go back to GitHub Desktop, and I can see that the changes that I've made since our previous commit are now listed. So things like creating a sprite. There are 2 of these because GameMaker's sprite like asset system is a little bit complicated for reasons. We can see our step event code in the .gml file. We can see our room code, which now has a GameMaker instance added to it. We can make another commit, and this can say something like added a player. And now if we go to the history tab, we have 2 commits. So this is source control. And from here on out, we're going to start getting into the good practices side of things. How often you should make a commit when you're working on a project is a subject which has been debated by humanity since probably before we invented the wheel. There are people who will make a commit every time they change a line of code or every time they change a couple lines of code. I think that's a little bit excessive. There are also people who will only make a commit once a day when they're done for the day, and I think that's a little bit excessive on the other side. I personally try to commit changes to my project whenever I finish working on one atomic thing. For example, if I've added player movement to the game, or if I've added the ability for the player to transfer between rooms to the game, or something like that, I'll make a commit. If I've added an NPC to the game and there's not much code changes but a bunch of new sprites, I'll make a commit. And what it really boils down to is if you ever want to look through the commit history and either see where a change was made, or if you made a mistake at some point earlier and you want to see what change caused your game to break or something like that, your commits should be both small enough that you could find the change that you're looking for, but also big enough that you don't have to scroll through a million lines in the history to find what you're looking for. That's really the happy medium that you probably should aim for when it comes to how often to commit your changes. And I think that's the next thing that we'll move on to. So let's say that we made a mistake in here. Let's say that we made, instead of keyboard check left, moving the player to the left, we move the player to the right. And let's say we invert the controls for fun reasons. And we can make a commit, and this can be something like, I don't know, made the player controls fun. And this is gonna obviously cause some problems, right? So if I hit the right key, I don't want to move to the left most of the time. So let's say that we didn't do that on purpose, and that was an accident, and we realized that our game isn't working properly, and we want to know where that happens. So we can look through our commit log, and we can see the changes that we made as we went along, and perhaps just by eye, you can see if something visually sticks out as suspicious to you, why did I invert the player controls like this? And from this point, you can go and either manually undo this change in the code. You can just invert the signs on these operations. You also have the option to go and revert changes in this commit. And this will create a new commit, which does exactly the opposite of what you did. So in the log, you probably could figure this out. The red lines are lines that were removed. Green lines are lines that were added. And if a line was changed, it will show both a red and a green line. And it will highlight the difference between the line. And we can see here that we started with a player controls that were going x minus equals 2 in the left direction, and it got changed to x plus equals 2. And we can see that in the commit that reverts that one, it's done the opposite. It's put the lines back to how they were before. If we go back to GameMaker, it will tell us that the project directory has been modified, and that is because GitHub Desktop changed the files on the disk. Anyway, so we're going to just hit reload here, and this is going to load the changes that GitHub made on the disk. If you hit save in that dialog, it'll just basically save your changes and you'll be back to where you started. And if I run the game now, we can see that our changes have been reverted. We can move up, down, left, and right, and there's going to be no weird surprises there. You can also go and sort of take this a step farther, and you can create different branches, and you can do all kinds of other things when it comes to using source control. I probably am not going to go that far into the more advanced Git things in this video. I'm not going to get into the collaboration things that you can do with Git or GitHub in this video. I would like to later on, but at this moment in time, I just want to get people familiar with and in the habit of using source control. Alright, is there anything else that's worth talking about? So I think there's going to be one more thing. So if I just make a change, and if I, let's say we invert the controls in a different way. Let's say y, like, times equals 2, and so this is obviously gonna make the game break in weird ways, right? So player just disappeared, the coordinates have gone flying off into the distance. If I have changes that have not been committed, Git will recognize them, and in the changes window, you'll see what those changes actually are. We saw this earlier. We know what this is by now, right? So if you have a change that you want to undo, let's say that we made a typo somewhere and we want to like revert it to what it was before. You can select your change, and if there's multiple changes, you can select all, and you can just say discard changes, and this will just get rid of it. And this will sort of remove changes from the staging ground before you actually commit them. And again, this pop-up will appear in GameMaker, and it'll ask you if you want to reload the changes, and you can click reload, and then it'll be back to normal. This is especially useful if you ever like delete something and you want to get it back. So I'm not sure if I would say this is a common request of GameMaker, but if you delete an asset in GameMaker, it will warn you. It will tell you that, like, this is an important thing you're doing. Are you sure you want to do this? And if you do it anyway, the file is going to be permanently deleted and there's going to be no way of getting it back. And once in a while, people will say, like, why doesn't GameMaker give you an option to, like, undo deletions like that? Like, why doesn't it have a built-in recycle bin? And I'm not going to say that that's the stupidest idea ever, like, for GameMaker to have some sort of built-in recycle bin that it sends deleted assets to or that kind of thing. But the core of the matter is that you really should be using source control, and source control will solve this problem for you. So if I deleted the sprite, I'll see that some files have been changed in the project folder. I'll see that some files have been deleted. Those are the ones marked with a red minus sign here. And if I want to undelete something that I accidentally got rid of, all I have to do is just either revert the commit that it happened in, or I can just, select all these. I can say discard these 5 changes and they'll come back. If you ever make a major change, like a file being added or deleted to the GameMaker project, when you have GameMaker open, when the pop-up appears that said files have changed on the disk, sometimes it will just reload the whole project. Anyway, the point of this is that now we just have our sprite back, and one of the many, many great things about source control is that, like, this is basically insurance, right? This is a way to protect yourself against making mistakes like that. And they don't even have to be your mistakes. Like, if the power goes out while you're working on something and, like, you lose a change and your project is corrupted, you can just use source control to recover what you were doing. And I kind of feel like saying what if the power goes out and your project gets corrupted is sort of a hyperbolic scenario, but it does happen. Every couple of weeks, someone will show up on the subreddit or on the Discord saying that, like, that exact thing happened to them, and is there a way to get back your work? And if you're working on source control, then there is an easy way to get back your work. If you're working without source control, then, well, good luck. Anyway, so I think that's all I'm going to do for today. I would like to make at least one more video on Git where I talk about the collaborative features, but that's going to have to wait for another time. Use source control. From this point forth, I think I will be throwing all of the projects that I work on as sample projects on GitHub, which you can go and look at and download for yourself if you want to play around with my sample code. But otherwise, my name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to the Steam page can be found down below. I like to post videos on all kinds of stuff you can do in GameMaker, so if any of this appeals to you, feel free to subscribe. I also have a Patreon, so if you wanted to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. Other than that, I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spydeye Games, Pixelated Pope, Paradox, Nykotic, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Brenton, BokehDev, and Argo the Knot for supporting these videos. If you want to join the ranks of these very cool people, head on down to the Patreon page in the video description to join the fun.